Sacagawea of the Northern Shoshone tribe is one of the most well-known women in American history. You may know her as Sacagawea.
Sacagawea was right here along the Madison River in our valley when she was captured by the Hidatsa. Because of this, she later met Lewis and Clark and accompanied them on one of the most important expeditions in American history.
The Lewis and Clark expedition crossed our valley going east and going west. It was here in Montana's Gallatin Valley that they reached the beginnings of the Missouri on their trip west.
On their return trip, part of the expedition came in this meadow, just east of what later became Bozeman.
The next day they left our valley when they crossed over this pass on the way to the Yellowstone River.
One of the mountains that surrounds the Gallatin Valley is named for Sacagawea. It is the highest point in the Bridger Range.
We can see the peak from our school.
Our school is also named for Sacagawea.
Sacagawea was born to the Lemhi tribe of the Northern Shoshone around 1789, about 13 years after the United States declared independence from Great Britain.
Bands of the Shoshone had originally been living for centuries in the Great Basin in a harsh desert environment. The Northern Shoshone had moved into the Rocky Mountains. They later ranged into the Great Plains, where they began using horses.
They became excellent horsemen and hunted buffalo. Sacagawea's band lived in what is now known as Idaho, and their nomadic life took them into Montana.
Other tribes who had guns were their enemies and made it dangerous for them when they were food gathering on the plains.
It was here at the headwaters of the Missouri River that Sacagawea was captured by a group of Hidatsa raiders when she was about 12 years old.
The Hidatsa, also known as Minataris, took her back to their home on the Knife River over 500 miles east in what is now called North Dakota. Perhaps her name is a Hidatsa word. It could not have been pronounced Sacagawea in Hidatsa or Shoshone. Sacagawea is more like what it would have sounded.
At the age of about 16, she became a wife of a French trapper, Toussaint Charbonneau, who may have won her in a hand game.
This game is displayed at the Museum of the Rockies.
Charbonneau takes his family to visit the camp of two explorers spending the winter nearby. Sacagawea's life is about to change.
The two explorers are Meriwether Lewis and William Clark, sent on an expedition by Thomas Jefferson, the third President of the United States.
Jefferson had tried 3 times before for 20 years to send expeditions to the west. Finally, one was underway. This was a replica of the peace medals he sent to present to the native leaders that they would meet on their journey.
The expedition took place just after Congress had approved the Louisiana Purchase. The United States became more than twice as large. Jefferson hoped to improve the U.S. trade routes.
He directed Lewis and Clark to make maps to go to the furthest places of the Missouri River, find the best route to the Pacific Ocean, learn about the people who lived there, and make scientific observations of the land, the plants, and the animals.
Starting from St. Louis, the expedition had gone up the Missouri River, as far as their keelboat could get north of present-day Bismarck, North Dakota.
They were spending the winter of 1805 at the fort they built near the Mandan and Hidatsa villages. Charbonneau comes to the fort and asks for a job with the expedition.
When the journey heads out west up the Missouri in April, Charbonneau is with them. So is his wife, Sacagawea, and their 2-month-old son, Jean-Baptiste.
Great.
They will spend 5 months crossing what is now Montana.
She showed her courage when the pirogue started to overturn in the swift river current in a high wind. She did not panic, but rescued the floating journal cases and other precious items.
They were often hungry, and Sacagawea helped them find a variety of edible plants. Just before the difficult section of the trip, around the Great Falls of the Missouri, she became so ill that she was near death. After a week, she recovered and carried on.
Sacagawea was getting back to country she recognized. They reached the headwaters of the Missouri and the place where she was captured. After several more weeks of traveling, she saw the rock her people called the Beaver's Head, and she knew she was near her home country.
Lewis and Clark hoped her presence would help them with the Shoshone. They would need to trade for horses in order to cross the Bitterroot Mountains before winter.
They meet the Shoshone, and Sacagawea is overjoyed to see them again, 5 years after she was captured, and to find that the chief is her brother.
The high mountain crossing ahead will be difficult, and she is encouraged to stay behind, but she decides to continue with the expedition, and even warns them of something that helps them obtain the horses.
Her courage and stamina in the face of hardships, such as the difficult crossing of the Bitterroot Mountains in the snow with little food, helped boost the morale of the 31 men she traveled with.
As the expedition continued down the Columbia toward the Pacific, her presence showed other tribes that the expedition was peaceful. Clark wrote in his journal, "The sight of this Indian woman, wife to one of our interpreters, confirmed those people of our friendly intentions."
They finally reached the mouth of the Columbia about a year and a half after leaving St. Louis.
When they had to decide where to build their winter fort, the captains took a vote. York, Clark's black slave, and Sacagawea voted too. It would be 100 years before women officially got to vote, and over 50 years before American men of all races were allowed to vote. A whale carcass had been found at the ocean. Sacagawea insisted on being allowed to go to the ocean and see the whale.
Lewis reports in his journal, she observed that she had traveled a long way with us to see the great waters.
After a long winter at Fort Clatsop, they began the long journey back home.
On the trip back, it was once again terribly difficult, crossing the mountains, where there was still snow and little food.
Once again, the Nez Perce helped them.
Back over the Bitterroot Mountains at the place they called Traveler's Rest, the expedition split up. Lewis would go back with some of the men by the shortcut to the Great Falls that they didn't know about on the way west. Clark would go back to the headwaters of the Missouri, and then they would later meet at the mouth of the Yellowstone.
They traveled back across the Gallatin Valley. It was full of beaver dams that blocked the way. The expedition camped here July 14, 1806.
Sacagawea had pointed out an old buffalo trail that her people used to get over the mountains. The group took it and proceeded on the Yellowstone River. The trip back downstream on the Yellowstone River went quickly once they made canoes near present-day Park City.
Captain Clark named this place Pompey's Pillar for Sacagawea's son, whom he had nicknamed Pompey.
The two parts of the expedition met up, and the end was reached. They had returned to St. Louis over 2 years after they had left. They had achieved everything Jefferson had hoped for, except for finding a water route to the Pacific, which did not exist. Charbonneau and Sacagawea came down to St. Louis for a while. Clark gave Charbonneau some land. They later returned upriver A journal entry from a man on the boat records that Charbonneau's wife was a very good woman and that she was ill. They stayed at Fort Manuel, where Sacagawea gave birth to a daughter, Lizette. A journal entry by a clerk at the fort reports that Charbonneau's wife died of a fever in December of 1812, that she was a good woman, and that she was about 25 years old.
Historians now feel certain that this woman was Sacagawea, especially because a notation of Clark's has been found, writing by Sacagawea's name, dead. However, an earlier historian, a Wyoming woman, had convinced many people that an old woman who had lived on the Wind River Reservation was Sacagawea. Many later interviews show this to be extremely unlikely. The historian herself told friends she wished she had not promoted that idea.
Sacagawea's children were adopted by Clark. No one knows what happened to Lizette. Charbonneau died in Louisiana. John Baptiste went to Europe and learned several more languages. He became an interpreter and guide when he returned to the United States.
Jean-Baptiste was there when gold was discovered at Sutter's Mill in California, and he died on the way to the Montana gold fields in 1866 at the age of 61. History tells us a great deal about Sacagawea, but still leaves some questions unanswered. We hope you have learned a lot about her and appreciate her place in American history.